Welcome to Reflect with Ed Fassio. Get ready to experience one of the world's first 100% digitally generated podcasts, where we take a step back, dive deep, and strive to learn new things. Join us as we unpack thought-provoking ideas, personal reflections, and inspiring stories to help you stay in the know. Reflect is brought to you by the minds at ByteBrain and powered by emerging technologies from Google, HeyGen, OpenAI, and 11 Labs. Thanks for tuning in. Now, relax and prepare to reflect.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're diving deep into something that I think is really relevant to a lot of people. Mentorship and masculinity in the modern world.
Yeah.
It's something that we've all been thinking about, especially with all the stuff going on these days.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Trying to figure out what it means to be a man in today's world.
Yeah.
And we actually got this summary and outline of a really interesting discussion about this. And it's quite the minefield out there, honestly.
It is. It's a conversation I think that we need to have. I think a lot of people are confused and, frankly, just not getting enough guidance.
Exactly. And the source material even starts off with this quote from the Godfather. Women and children can afford to be careless, but not men.
Wow.
Right? Like on the surface, maybe a little bit outdated, a little harsh even, but it points to the sense of responsibility that's traditionally been put on men, this weight.
Yeah. No, I think that quote really highlights that old school view of masculinity.
Yeah.
The stoicism, the duty, always being the strong one. And while some of that might need a bit of an update for the 21st century, the core idea of men being reliable and men having a sense of purpose, I think those are still incredibly important.
Okay, so let's dive into this mentorship gap that the source talks about. What really struck me was how they connect this decline in mentorship to some of the really serious challenges that men are facing today. What are your thoughts on that connection?
Well, I mean, think about it. If you don't have strong male role models in your life, who are you learning from?
Mm-hmm.
The source talks about the rise of a lot of these online figures, some of whom are, let's be honest, peddling some pretty toxic masculinity. It's like, in the absence of a good map, some guys are just grabbing whatever compass they can find, even if it's pointing them in the wrong direction.
That's such a great analogy. It's like, without that solid foundation of mentorship, they're turning towards these questionable influences. And is that what the research from Psychology of Men and Masculinities and the American Psychological Association, is that what that's also pointing to?
Absolutely. Psychology of Men and Masculinities in particular, it digs into how this lack of mentorship makes it harder for men to reconcile those old school values with the world as it is now. And the APA, they emphasize the need for what they call positive masculinity. Things like nurturing your strengths, being a good person, but mentorship is so crucial for developing those qualities.
So it's not just about, avoiding the bad stuff. It's about actively learning how to be good. And it's interesting because the author shares some of his personal experiences in the source. And some of those stories are really powerful, especially the one about the woman seeking advice.
Yeah, that one really struck me too, the author's advice to her, to seek guidance from someone who's actually walked a similar path. I think that's wisdom that we can all apply. There's something powerful about learning from someone who's been there, who gets it.
Totally. Now, the source lays out these 4 core principles of mentorship: resilience, discipline, vulnerability, and leadership. I mean, these seem pretty universal, don't you think? Not just like manly things, but just good human qualities.
Yeah. These are the building blocks of a strong character. Regardless of your gender, resilience, for example, is about bouncing back from setbacks. Life's going to throw you curveballs, but it's about getting back up and learning from those experiences.
And then there's discipline. God knows I could use a bit more of that myself.
Oh, we all could. But in all seriousness, discipline is about setting goals and sticking to them. It's about delaying gratification, putting in the work even when it's tough. And it's really the foundation for achieving anything worthwhile.
Okay. Resilience, discipline. What about vulnerability? That seems to be a tricky one, especially in the context of traditional masculinity.
Yeah, you're right. It can be. But vulnerability is about having the strength to admit when you need help. It's about recognizing that you don't have all the answers, and that's okay. It's about building trust and connection with others by letting them see your authentic self, imperfections and all.
So it's about being real, not putting on a front. And finally, there's leadership. What does that look like in the context of mentorship?
Yeah, it's not about bossing people around, but about inspiring them to be their best selves. It's about using your experience, your knowledge to guide others, to motivate them to reach their full potential.
So mentorship's about more than just giving advice. It's about empowering others. Now, one thing the source emphasizes is that balance is key here. You can be strong without being rigid, vulnerable without being weak. It's about finding that sweet spot where all these qualities kind of work together.
Exactly. It's not about fitting into some predefined box of what a man should be, but about embodying these principles in a way that feels authentic to you.
Now, this next part is where things get a little interesting. The source dives into this idea of masculine and feminine energy and how they play a role in relationships. Can you unpack that for us?
Okay, so, we're not talking about stereotypes here. What the source means is that these energies exist within all of us, regardless of gender. Masculine energy is often associated with things like assertiveness, drive, taking charge. Feminine energy, on the other hand, is more about intuition, empathy, nurturing.
So it's not about being more manly or womanly, but about finding a balance between these different energies within ourselves.
Exactly. And this balance, this dance between masculine and feminine, it's crucial in relationships. The source highlights how, for example, in romantic relationships, there's often an attraction to the opposite energy. But that doesn't mean one person has to be all masculine and the other all feminine. It's about finding that dynamic that works for both people.
So it's about embracing the full spectrum of who you are and finding someone who complements that. I like that.
Yeah, it's really about recognizing that we all have both masculine and feminine qualities within us. And it's about finding a way to express those qualities in a healthy and balanced way.
Right, so we've covered the decline of mentorship, the core principles, this whole energy dynamic. Now the source gets into the nitty-gritty of rebuilding a culture of mentorship, which is a pretty ambitious goal. Where do we even begin with that?
Well, the source breaks it down into 4 key areas. At home, in the workplace, in the community, and by actively seeking out mentors. It's a call to action, really, for all of us to step up and participate.
Okay, let's break that down. Starting at home, what does rebuilding mentorship look like in that context?
It starts with fathers or father figures being present and engaged. It's about setting a good example, teaching boys how to be resilient, disciplined, compassionate, and yes, showing them that it's okay to be vulnerable, to ask for help.
So it's about dads being active participants in their sons' lives, not just the distant authority figure. What about in the workplace?
In the workplace, the source highlights the responsibility of men in leadership roles. It's about being more than just a boss, but a mentor, guiding younger colleagues, offering advice, sharing your experiences, not just about work, but about life. It's about investing in the next generation.
That makes a lot of sense. It's about building a more supportive and collaborative work environment. And then there's community involvement. How does that tie into mentorship?
The source encourages men to seek out or create spaces where they can connect with other men in meaningful ways. Think faith-based organizations, professional networks, sports teams, hobby groups, even just regular gatherings with friends who are on a similar path of growth.
So it's about finding your tribe, so to speak, and building those supportive connections.
Exactly. It's about fostering a sense of brotherhood, a sense of shared purpose. It's about knowing you're not alone in this journey. And finally, the source stresses the importance of not just being a mentor, but also actively seeking out mentors yourself.
That's something I think a lot of people overlook. It's like, oh, I'll just magically find a mentor one day. But it takes effort, right?
It absolutely does. If you're looking for guidance, you have to be proactive. Identify what you need help with, what qualities you admire, and then find people who embody those qualities. Reach out, express your interest in learning from them, and be willing to put in the work.
So it's a two-way street. You got to be willing to both give and receive.
That's the heart of it. And the source really drives that point home with this fascinating analysis of gangster movies. They talk about The Godfather, American Me.
Wait, gangster movies. How does that fit in with all this?
It might seem like a weird connection, but hear me out. The source argues that these films, while often violent and glamorizing a criminal lifestyle, actually touch on some deep truths about masculinity.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
They highlight things like loyalty, responsibility, protecting your family, your community. These are values that, in the right context, are actually positive. But in these films, they're often twisted and distorted.
So these movies, they're like a cautionary tale almost.
In a way, yes. They show what can happen when those values are taken to an extreme, when they're used to justify violence and destructive behavior. It highlights the dangers of isolation, of anger, of trying to solve problems with force instead of reason.
But at the same time, they also show the importance of having a strong network, right? Like these characters, they're fiercely loyal to their crew, their family. It's twisted, but there's a kernel of truth there.
Exactly, and that's what the source is getting at. These movies remind us that even in the darkest of places, there's still a yearning for connection, for belonging. It's a reminder that we all need those strong bonds, those positive influences in our lives.
This has been a really fascinating conversation so far, I have to say. We've gone from The Godfather to psychology research to gangster movies. It's all connected, isn't it?
It really is. We've explored the challenges men face today, the decline of mentorship, the core principles that can guide us, the importance of balance, the power of connection.
And this is just the beginning. We still got a lot more to unpack, so stick with us as we continue our deep dive into mentorship and masculinity in the modern world.
Business owners, listen up. Partnering with Reflect to create a custom episode is seriously next level. Studies show that 92% of consumers prefer brand stories over traditional ads, and storytelling boosts brand recall by up to 22x. Imagine building a unique arc around your brand that really connects. Reflect is disrupting how brands go to market, reaching a global audience with storytelling that sticks. Ready to move beyond typical ads and make an impact? Head to reflectpodcast.com for more info and book a free consultation. They're telling the future. Are you in it?
It's funny how those gangster movies can spark such a deep conversation about masculinity, It's almost like they're holding up a distorted mirror to some of those core values we've been talking about.
Yeah, and you hit on something earlier about them being cautionary tales. And it got me thinking, in the absence of good mentorship, those movies almost become aspirational for some guys.
Yeah, it's a slippery slope. And the source material even points out how those films can glorify violence, make it seem like the only way to solve problems or gain respect. And for someone who's already feeling lost or lacking direction...
It fills a void, right? But with a pretty dangerous narrative.
Exactly. And that's why it's so crucial to have those positive influences in our lives, those mentors who can show us a different way.
Okay, so we talked about the dangers of those unhealthy influences. But what about the flip side? What are some practical things guys can do to actively cultivate more positive masculinity in their lives?
Well, first and foremost, it's about awareness. Recognize those unhealthy patterns, those limiting beliefs you might have picked up along the way. Challenge them. Ask yourself, is this serving me? Is this who I want to be?
It's like taking inventory of your mental toolkit and figuring out what needs an upgrade.
Exactly. And then it's about seeking out those positive influences. Connect with men you admire, guys who are living examples of the values you want to embody. Read books, listen to podcasts. Surround yourself with content that inspires you.
The source also talks about this interplay of masculine and feminine energy within all of us.
Yeah.
How does that fit into this idea of cultivating a healthier masculinity?
It's about recognizing that we all have both masculine and feminine qualities within us, and that neither is inherently good or bad. It's about finding that balance, that integration, where those energies can work together harmoniously.
I'm curious, do you think that traditional view of masculinity, that strong, silent type, do you think that actually prevents men from fully embracing those feminine qualities?
I think it definitely can. Society often tells men to suppress their emotions, to be tough and stoic. And while those qualities can be valuable in certain situations, they shouldn't come at the expense of empathy, compassion, intuition.
So it's about being a fully realized human being, not just fitting some stereotype of what a man should be.
Exactly. And I think that's ultimately what the source is advocating for, a more nuanced, more balanced view of masculinity, one that embraces the full spectrum of who we are.
Now, I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier about rebuilding a culture of mentorship, starting at home.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to fathers who want to raise their sons with a healthier, more balanced view of masculinity?
Well, it's about being present. Being engaged in your son's life. It's about listening to him, really hearing him. And it's about modeling the behavior you want to see. Show him that it's okay to express his emotions, to be vulnerable, to ask for help.
It's about showing him, not just telling him.
Right. Exactly. Actions speak louder than words. And don't be afraid to talk to him about your own struggles, your own journey. Let him know that it's okay to not have all the answers, that we're all learning and growing as we go.
What about those tougher conversations? The ones about sex, relationships, the stuff that can be awkward to talk about,
Those conversations are crucial. Don't shy away from them. Create an open and honest space where your son feels comfortable coming to you with questions and concerns. And remember, it's okay to not have all the answers. Sometimes just listening and offering your support is enough.
The source also talks about the role of mentorship in the workplace. What does that look like in a practical sense?
Well, it starts with leaders creating a culture where mentorship is valued and encouraged. This means making time for it, providing resources, and setting a good example. It's about recognizing that investing in the growth and development of your employees is not just a nice thing to do, it's good for business.
So it's a win-win. You're developing your employees and strengthening your company at the same time.
Absolutely. And mentorship doesn't have to be a formal program with structured meetings and all that. It can be as simple as offering a listening ear to a colleague who's struggling, sharing your experience, giving them a different perspective.
Yeah, those informal interactions can be just as powerful, can't they?
Sometimes even more so. It's about building genuine connections, fostering a sense of trust and support.
And then there's the community aspect. What are some ways guys can build those supportive connections outside of the family and workplace?
The source mentions things like faith-based organizations, sports teams, hobby groups. It's about finding something you're passionate about and connecting with other people who share that passion.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be something super structured, right? It could just be a group of friends who get together regularly to talk about life, to support each other.
Exactly. The key is to create those spaces where men can feel comfortable being themselves, where they can let their guard down and be open and honest with each other.
We talked earlier about the importance of actively seeking out mentors. Any advice for guys who are looking for that guidance but aren't sure where to start?
Well, think about the areas where you need support, the qualities you admire in others. Who are the people in your life or even public figures you respect who embody those qualities?
So it's about identifying your needs and then looking for people who can meet those needs.
Right. And don't be afraid to reach out to people. Most people are flattered to be asked for advice or guidance.
What if you're intimidated by someone, though? Like, what if you admire someone but they seem super successful or out of reach?
Don't let that stop you. You'd be surprised how many successful people are willing to give back and help others. And remember, mentorship doesn't have to be a lifelong commitment. It can be a short-term relationship, a one-time conversation even.
I think that's important to emphasize. It's not about finding the perfect mentor. It's about being open to learning from anyone who has something valuable to share.
Exactly. And remember, mentorship is a two-way street. As you grow and learn, be open to mentoring others. Share your experiences, offer your support, pay it forward.
This whole conversation has been really eye-opening, I have to say. I feel like we've just scratched the surface of this whole mentorship and masculinity thing.
We definitely have. It's a complex and ever-evolving topic, but I think what we've discussed today provides a good foundation for continuing the conversation.
Absolutely. And I think it's a conversation that's more important now than ever. Listening to you talk about all of this, it makes me realize just how much we absorb from the world around us. It's like those gangster movies, those messages, they kind of seep in whether we realize it or not.
It's subtle, but it's powerful. And I think that's why this whole conversation about mentorship and masculinity is so important, We need to be intentional about the messages we're consuming, the role models we're choosing.
Yeah, because those messages shape how we see ourselves, how we relate to others. It's like the source is saying, hey, if you want to change the world, start by changing the narrative.
Exactly. It's about rewriting the script, so to speak. And that starts with each of us taking responsibility for our own growth and development.
We've talked a lot about how a lack of good mentorship can lead guys down some pretty unhealthy paths. But what about the flip side? What are some of the tangible benefits of having strong, positive male role models in your life?
Well, for one, it provides a sense of direction, a roadmap, if you will. When you have someone who's been there, who's navigated those challenges, it gives you a sense of hope, a belief that you can do it too.
It's like having a guide in uncharted territory.
Exactly. And it also provides a sense of accountability, When you know someone's invested in your success, you're more likely to stay on track, make better choices.
Yeah, it's that external motivation we sometimes need to push ourselves further to reach our full potential.
Absolutely. And it's not just about achieving external success. It's about developing your character, becoming the best version of yourself. A good mentor challenges you to grow, to think differently, to step outside your comfort zone.
So it's about more than just learning skills. It's about developing your whole self.
Precisely. And I think that's one of the most valuable things a mentor can offer. A belief in your potential, even when you might not see it yourself.
The source material also touches on something I've been thinking about a lot lately. This idea that we need to redefine what it means to be a real man in the 21st century. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I think it's absolutely essential, The old stereotypes, the strong, silent type, the breadwinner, those just don't cut it anymore.
Yeah, we live in a different world now with different challenges and different expectations.
Exactly. And I think a healthy masculinity embraces the full spectrum of human emotions and experiences. It's about being strong and resilient, yes, but also being compassionate, empathetic, vulnerable when you need to be.
So it's about being a whole person, not just fitting into some outdated mold.
Exactly. And it's about recognizing that there are many different ways to be a man. There's no one right way.
This whole conversation has really got me thinking about my own role in all of this, I haven't really thought of myself as a mentor before, but I guess in a way we're all mentors to someone, whether we realize it or not.
That's a great point. We all have the potential to influence others, to make a difference in their lives.
So even if we don't have some formal title or position, we can still be role models. We can still offer guidance and support.
Absolutely. It can be as simple as being a good friend, a listening ear, someone who believes in another person's potential.
Okay, so let's say you're someone listening to this and thinking, all right, this all sounds great, but I'm not sure where to start. What advice would you give them?
Well, first, just be open to the possibility of mentorship, both giving and receiving. Look around your life. Who are the people you admire, who inspire you? Reach out to them, even if it feels awkward or intimidating.
What if you're on the other side of that and someone reaches out to you looking for guidance?
Don't underestimate the impact you can have. You don't need to have all the answers. Just be willing to share your experiences, offer your perspective.
It's about paying it forward, isn't it?
Exactly. And you never know. You might learn just as much from the person you're mentoring as they learn from you.
This has been a really powerful conversation. I feel like we've covered so much ground, but there's still so much to explore. Any final thoughts you want to leave our listeners with?
Just this. The future of masculinity is in our hands. It's up to us to redefine it, to reshape it, to create a world where men feel supported and empowered to be their authentic selves.
That's a great note to end on. Thanks so much for joining me for this deep dive into mentorship and masculinity. It's been a truly enlightening conversation. And to our listeners, we hope this deep dive has given you some food for thought. How can you actively contribute to rebuilding a culture of strong, balanced men through mentorship and role modeling? We encourage you to continue exploring this topic and apply these insights to your own lives and relationships. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll catch you next time.
In the cyber ocean of online voices and recycled content, something different has arrived. Reflect isn't just another podcast, it's the future of storytelling, powered entirely by AI. From curating data to assembling thought-provoking ideas, we've redefined how journeys are told. Reflect is a podcast that thinks, learns, and evolves with each episode. Every tale, every insight, crafted by the most advanced AI technologies. A podcast that disrupts the industry, breaking free from traditional formats, taking you on an entirely new experience. So tune in now and reflect. We're telling the future.